right, welcome back to Long Island's number one pro wrestling broadcast, Monte The Pharaoh, only seen here out of Indie Music Studios, out of Ronkonkoma, Long Island. Abe, show number two.
Yes, sir.
It's getting warmer in the studio. It's about 3 degrees now.
Yeah, right. I had to break out the gloves, but we're making it work.
I think the camera froze. That's why we lost the
I, I can't think of any other reason.
It'd be nice if they put some heat on in this place. Anyway, our special guest, and what an honor, Steve Keirn, Stan Lane, the fabulous ones. How are you guys? Thanks for joining me.
We're fabulous.
It's a pleasure being here.
It's a pleasure to have you guys. So, I was talking to Steve before you came on. I was talking to Stan. You guys don't get to talk too often, huh? Like, in the wrestling world, do you guys just drift apart just like regular life? Or, like, how does that work?
Well, I mean, to condense it as best I can is like we all have our own lives. We all have families. We have, other friends in the same respect. And I mean, if you don't live right on top of each other, then you likely don't communicate as much, but we still stay in touch. I mean, we call them birthdays or special occasions, or if, just happen to think about you or something comes up business-wise. But, I mean, there's so many guys and people you meet in our industry that, to keep a close communication with everybody is really difficult, and have your own family and life, too. So Stan and I are close. And our friendship extends from back before even the Fabulous Ones. And with that being in consideration that, Macho Man said it the best to me. He says, unconditional friendship, brother, no matter when it is. It's just like when you come in and you go out. But it's always the same. You start back at the same spot.
Great answer, Steve. What about you, Stan? Is it that you just drifted away from the wrestling life, or like how does that happen?
I think on my end, I believe it goes back to my childhood because I was the only child, and didn't have any brothers or sisters, so I'm kind of used to being alone, and I don't mind being alone. I can entertain myself with doing some stuff, whether it's here in my music room or on the golf course or whatever. So I've kind of regret it now. To be honest with you, I should have maintained better contact with a lot of guys in the business, but I was the same way with my 20-year offshore powerboat broadcasting career. I don't really maintain a whole lot of contact with those guys, and I probably should because we're only here once for a short while, and if I could go back and do it over again, I would probably change that.
I think a lot of us would feel that way. I mean, and especially in the wrestling world, I think it's a little bit different, and you guys could correct me, but you have your real life, like Steve had just said, and your family, but then you have your wrestling family, and you guys build probably a more powerful bond than even like a regular schmo like myself. So when you lose your partners in the wrestling business, like, Stan, you with Bobby Eaton, or Steve, you just mentioned Randy Savage. How does that affect you guys? Steve, if you'd answer first.
Okay, are you talking about passing away?
Yes, sir.
Or you just can't find them anymore?
No, just
I mean,
passing away.
Okay. I just want to make sure I get it straight because Bobby was my partner too, and both Stan and I love Bobby. And to me, I put him in the top 5, in my opinion, of the best wrestlers ever to ever step in the ring. Maybe he wasn't like a greatest speaker or whatever, but as a guy that could work and you could always depend on, that was a guy that I would put up there with Curt Hennig, and just there's only a category of about 5 that I'd say that. But losing them, you never lose them. I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, if you were to look at my phone and look through my contact list on my phone, you would see every one of them that's gone that have passed away still in there. And I've had a couple people looking at, sometimes a contact say, hey, you still got Dusty in here? And I go, well, yeah, I'd feel guilty if I erased them. I mean, they're still active in my mind. It's like, you know, reality is that they could still be alive as close as some of us are. As we're separated by miles, we're separated by families and time. So I try not to think about them as gone. I just think about them that when I die and go to heaven, because I know, because I believe in Jesus, that I'm going to be in a battle royal with half of them. Well, maybe not half, maybe a quarter, because a lot of them didn't go.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you, Steve. With your powerful belief in Christ, does it make it easier for you to not be so affected by death?
Oh, I'm not affected by death at all. I look through the eyes of faith, not the eyes of fear. I mean, reality, this is a simple thing. 1 out of 1 people are going to die. And when you think about dying, if you're terrified or if you give it no thought at all, that's an opposite. But the idea is I'm at peace. I've lived an unbelievable life. I have the people that I went to high school with, they can't even compare to the life I led after that, except for, well, of course, I went to high school with Hulk Hogan and Mike Graham and Dick Slater and Austin Idol. But that's not the idea. It's the idea that, God took me through an unbelievable life. I've seen the world 10 times over. I mean, I've done things that people couldn't imagine doing, met people that, you would never fathom you'd meet. I'm blessed. I'm so blessed that I'm at peace that if I went tomorrow, I'm not excited about going tomorrow now, but if I did, I wouldn't have any regrets at all. I'd be totally at peace.
You're a lucky man. I love it. Listen,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go off script a little bit here because I do have a
Sure.
question. Last week, and both of you, I don't know if you remember the Son of Sam back in the '70s in New York for about a year. He was shooting people, the 44 caliber killer. Do you guys remember that at all?
Back then we were working pretty full time, and we heard stories and stuff. But media and coverage and stuff like that isn't. All I heard was bits and pieces, and I don't really know the whole story about that. But I'm real familiar with hearing the name Son of Sam.
Okay. But
I think,
so
I
I
think
guess the point of the question I have, and I'll ask both of you this, I'll start with you, Steve, is we just talked about Christ, right? And
Yes, sir.
we're human beings. We all make mistakes. We have problems. Someone like this man who murdered people, or someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, more recent history, eating people,
Right.
but both at the end of their life, well, Son of Sam, David Berkowitz is still with us. He found Christ. Jeffrey Dahmer found Christ right before he was killed in jail. My
Sure.
question to you, Steve, and I'll ask Stan. I didn't even ask Stan how big your faith is, but if a man truly wants
Well, he's a
forgiveness,
believer. Stan's a believer. I'm going to tell you right now. He'll answer for himself.
okay,
But this is my brother in Christ that you're talking to on that other side.
perfect. If
I'm
a
sorry. I'm
man,
sorry. I didn't mean
no, it's fine. If a man truly wants forgiveness after committing such horrific things on this planet, does Christ forgive him?
Yes. If he confesses that Christ is his Lord and Savior who died on the cross and resurrected 3 days later, if he truly believes in Jesus Christ, he's going to be facing him the minute he closes his eyes. So if he wants to make that kind of commitment, then Christ will forgive him. That's a simple thing. It's hard for us to fathom that Jesus Christ can forgive somebody right up until the time they die, but that's just what it says in the Bible. I've read the Bible 21 times through, and I'm on my 22nd time. And you can't take it out of the Bible. Here's the whole thing. It's the same as, can you forgive other people for the things they've done? And if you can't, then how can you ask Christ to forgive you for all the things you've done? I mean, to be perfectly straightforward, because I never used the thing being perfectly honest. Be perfectly straightforward. There's so many things that Christ could have turned his back on me for, but he didn't. He accepted me and he forgave me, and I feel it, and I feel blessed all the time. Is life perfect? Absolutely not. I could give you a list. When I get together with my friends down here in Florida, there's about 40 living in the Tampa Bay area. All we talk about is injuries and, I mean, knee replacements, hip replacements. I mean, somebody's got problems in their stomach. Somebody's got a back surgery. But it's all injuries. But do they get over them? 9 times out of 10. So, there's problems and all of that. But I do believe that he forgives them. And it's just what I believe.
Stan, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are life here on Earth is just a wisp of wind. When you talk about eternity with your Lord and Savior, that's a whole different ballgame. Earth is a 3-dimensional to me, and our bodies are just vessels. Your soul, in my opinion, never dies. I think it's for perpetuity. And I'm not sure about the reincarnation, but I sort of believe you might come back. I think we're here to learn lessons, and when you're a believer in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, I think the lesson you want to learn is just like Steve said. People trespass against you, but you have to forgive them. Now, you don't have to forget maybe, but you need to forgive them because Jesus died on the cross for all of our sins. He's already paid the price. So that's the way I see it.
Now, Stan, have you always been a believer in Christ since you were a child, or is it something that you grew into?
No, I come from a family of ministers. My grandfather, who actually I watched my first pro wrestling match with, he was a huge wrestling fan, but he was a Baptist minister. He loved Johnny Weaver and George Becker back in the old Mid-Atlantic days in the mid-'60s. I was probably 10 years old, and that was back when they had Rip Hawkins, Sweet Hansen, and Aldo Bogny, Bronco Lubitsch, the Kentuckians, and I remember very well. And he would just sit there and he would just do his fists and like the boom boom like that. He loved it. My cousin David that I saw today and spent time with, he helped me convince my mother that who was 103 years old, she needs to move from independent living to assisted living, and that was kind of a hard deal. But he drove up from Cary, North Carolina, to help me convince her. He's a minister, so I come from a family background of believers, and I'm quite proud of it.
How about you, Steve?
I've always wanted to, but straightforward again, I've just wandered on and off. I mean, I was raised in a military family, and my mother was from Mississippi, born on a farm, and that was the way she was raised as a Baptist, young woman. And then my mom and dad moving around from base to base. We changed different denominations from Baptist to Presbyterian to Methodist. And every time I'd start somewhere in school or get into Sunday school or whatever, we'd move. I mean, every 2 or 3 years we moved. And then when we moved to the state of Florida, I was going into the 6th grade and we never moved again. And I really didn't really follow, what was going on so far as spiritually. But here's what happened to me. It wasn't until I was about 50 years old that I decided that I had been wrong pretty much all my life about the way I accepted things. And I used a miracle that had happened in my life as a testimony to me of believing and trusting and having faith. Was I would witness my mother on her knees every night that I would come home late when I was a teenager, and see her on her knees praying at her bed. And my dad was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And this went on for 7 years and 7 months. And I never saw my mother lose faith. And also, my mother was really strict. When we'd sit down to dinner, if we start to eat before she'd say grace, she'd cut a promo on me. And I mean, after a while, I kind of resented it a little bit when I got a little bit older. And I'm going, Mom, you got to have to say grace every time. I said, can't we say it once for the day? I mean, I kind of was resenting it. I went away to college. And I went to Mississippi College in Jackson, right out of Jackson, Mississippi. It's where Ted DiBiase lives now. It's Clinton. And when I was there, they had a evangelistic thing going on, and I went to it, and everybody was accepting Christ, and I accepted Christ, and I never felt nothing. I didn't see no magic. I didn't feel no magic. So it kind of just went in and out. But then around 50 years old, all of a sudden I had this brainstorm as how did I survive all of this? From the time I started in the wrestling business to where I was at now, towards the end almost of my wrestling career, I said, how did I survive this? And then I started rationalizing and said, wait a minute, there's only one answer. And here's the way I looked at it. I said, when I was in my 20s, I'd say, man, I'll never live to be 30. I mean, the life I'm living, I ain't going to live to be 30. I'm going to be in a car accident, a plane accident, something. Then I got to 30s, and I'll never live to be 40. Then I'll never live to be 50. And then all of a sudden I'm 50, and I'm going, man, I sure hope I live to be 60. And it's my whole change of attitude. But it was actually surrendering. And I've got a great pastor down here in the state of Florida that just retired from a huge Baptist church called Idlewild Baptist Church. And I went and listened to him preach. And I took my family. I've got a wife and 2 children. And we went. And as we were listening to him, I just got so moved. When they said, anybody want to join the church? I jumped right up, and I was right down there. And then I just never turned back. And then I started growing. And when I got a Bible, a friend of mine gave me a Bible that was a one-a-day Bible that you read the Old Testament and the New Testament. At the end of the year, if you read every day, short bit, you've read the entire Bible. And I got turned on because I've never read a whole book in my life. And now I'm reading the Bible, and then I just couldn't stop putting it down. And every day got better and better. And since then, I'm in. I've been in.
Stan, do you think, like both religious as I am, but do you think problems with this country stem from the lack of religion that's going on in this country right now?
Absolutely. I think that probably the majority of people have turned their backs on Christ. And I think a lot of people they probably don't realize it now that don't follow, politics. I'm not talking about watching Mockingbird mainstream media, which is just nothing but mind control programming. I'm talking about people are actually worshiping a God, but it's Satan. I think there's a lot of Satanists around the whole world now, and I think there's going to be some shocked people, and I hope and pray it's this year, because we've been enduring 3 or 4 years of just chaos. Everything's upside down. I'm hoping this year will be a year of revelation, and I think people are going to have to turn back to Christ in order to save the world. I think it's gotten that bad. I think when we find out what's been going on with all these missing children and all kinds of just underhanded dark stuff. I'm talking witches and warlocks and all kind of crazy stuff. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think, yeah, absolutely. I think people need to turn back and turn their faces back to Christ.
And you guys thought we were going to be talking about wrestling. I bring the fabulous ones on, and
Well, actually, this is a better subject than wrestling right now. More people need to hear this and testimonies than they need to hear old wrestling stories, but sometimes that's what people want to hear too. So
no,
we got plenty of stories too.
I know you do, and honestly, thank you for your candidness. Right, it takes a lot to stand up for your beliefs, and especially in today's cancel culture society. So I commend both of you for being so honest about your beliefs and your thoughts.
Here's the thing. All the glory to God. First of all, it's not me and Stan and our message. It's all the glory to God. We're not doing this to gain any popularity or anything. We're just telling it like it is. And, people that don't want to hear it, you don't think that I'm persecuted for righteousness, the life I led? I mean, I just had a friend text me just today, and said, I realized after I saw you at a party how spiritual you really are. And I thought it was just kind of like a make-believe thing. But he said, I just got out of the hospital with some gastric problems with my stomach. Would you mind praying for me? He said, because I feel like you really are in touch. And I was like moved, but at the same time, I tried to explain it to him. It's not me. I'm a messenger. All I am is a messenger. I'm not, a pastor. I'm just somebody that realizes the truth. And I'm going to say it in the Bible twice. In Matthew and in Luke, it says, acknowledge me publicly. And this is Jesus. Acknowledge me publicly, and I will acknowledge you before my Father. Like Stan said, eternity is a lot longer than this blink of an eye on earth, and I'm planning on acknowledging him every time I get a chance. So that's where I'm at.
Steve, that leads me to a tough question for you then, right? You trained
Sure.
with the great Graham family. Eddie certainly was a tough guy, and they didn't take any crap, right? They tested
Not at
you. From what
all.
again, I'm just a fan going off what
That's
I
okay.
understand. So I guess, and I don't know if you were part of it, but you guys beat up on a lot of guys when they were training. You tested a lot of guys and actually physically hurt them. When you look back at that now, do you have regrets? And I'm not saying you did it. I don't know. I just, from stories, do you
Um,
have regrets at all?
um, well, first of all, I didn't. I'm not what's classified as a shooter, and I wasn't a shooter when I started. Did I did I have to deal with shooters? Absolutely. That was part of your induction in Florida Championship Wrestling back here. And the reason it was is Eddie was trying to instill how important it was to kayfabe your audience and keep it as real as possible. It wasn't to make it any realer for us, but it was to give us respect for it. Because at his psychology was is if I take a butt whipping for 6 months every day and get my butt handed to me for 3 or 4 hours of that time, at the end, when some mark comes up to me in a bar or on the street and says, hey, wrestling's all fake, right? The first thing I'm going to say is, oh, yeah? Well, come on outside and let's find out who comes back in that door. That's the kind of respect he wanted for the wrestling business. It was a reality deal in here in the state of Florida. We weren't trying to sell entertainment. When I started in the wrestling business in 1972, we were appearing in front of the same audiences 52 times a year. Every week we were showing up. And we had to keep them interested in coming. We were the same category as a magician. You knew it wasn't real, but you just can't figure it out. Well, Eddie walked that fine line of reality and being entertainment. Dusty Rhodes was the first and probably one of the very few that really got successful here in the state of Florida with a little bit more entertainment value. But Dusty had a gift of gab and charisma that crossed racial lines. Dusty had no heat, no heat whatsoever, even as a baby face with anybody in the audience. They loved him no matter if they were black, white, yellow, or polka dot. And he got, and the crowd, and here's the opposite. Jack Briscoe was one of the greatest baby faces in the state of Florida. You could not see through his work. But he had heat because he was so damn good looking that guys would be sitting in the audience with their wife or their girlfriend, and he'd look at their girlfriend and look at him and say, man, I wish you looked like Jack Briscoe.
There you
And
go.
now Jack hadn't done anything, but they hate Jack Briscoe's guts like they used to say when me and Stan were wrestling. They'd say, hey, I wish you looked like Stan Lane. And I'd start laughing because I was the only one over then. I'm just kidding. He's a good
Stan,
looking man. He's a good guy.
Stan, what
Yes.
makes you become a pro wrestler? How does that even happen?
Yeah, well, like I said a little while ago, my granddad got me started on it, and I started watching it, like I got older, and When I saw Ric Flair, I really identified with him because I've been a lifeguard during the summer months and college and stuff, and I like that whole look. I like the muscles. I like the tan, the blonde hair, beach look, and the girls. When I heard Flair do his promos, it's gotten to the point where I can walk in any bar in the country and women pass out. When I heard that stuff, I just thought, God, this is so good. I'd love to do this. The way it kind of worked out was it was funny because I was living at Myrtle Beach in the summer of '78, and I was the doorman, the head bouncer at the hottest nightclub down there called Mother Fletcher's, and I worked part time at the Myrtle Beach Hilton in the morning doing room service, and I got an order for 4 Bloody Marys, Flair, room 1106 or whatever it was, and I went up and knocked on the door. The door opens and it was Ric Flair. I went, Nature Boy, and we started talking and stuff, and off, and I was all pumped up then too, and had kind of the same look. And Greg Valentine was down there at the same time too, but I think they just wrestled in Conway, and I think that night they were going to wrestle in Myrtle Beach, actually, or somewhere close in South Carolina. So they were staying over for a couple of days in Myrtle Beach, and I got them to come down to Mother Fletcher's and be the guest judges for our world famous wet T-shirt contest. So that's how we hit it off. It was just fate. It's just being the old adage, being in the right place at the right time.
Wow. Steve, back to you. We talked about the Grahams. How close did you stay with Mike Graham before his passing?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I spoke at his eulogy, and a lot of people were misled in the state of Florida, and even the ones that we went to school with and grew up with, because that they kind of from the wrestling business and being on TV every Saturday and Sunday, and then at the live events and stuff, they thought Mike and I had become best friends, and we were friends. And I owed the Grahams a lot because that they started me in the wrestling business and gave me the opportunity. And I mean, but here it is. It wasn't like a sugar coating. I mean, I didn't start in the wrestling business as a second generation wrestler. I was just friends with the second generation wrestler. And I had to leave and I had to move on. And I went from territory to territory while Mike stayed here. So our friendship separated by miles and by territories and by experience. And by the time I would come back periodically and work the state of Florida, I had changed levels on the ladder. And what I mean by that is there's a ladder you climb up, and your first 5 years in this industry and that generation was about 5 years you were green. And to get any opportunities or breaks, you almost had to be a second generation wrestler or a family friend or something because of the nepotism in the business. And I just kind of went out on my own and made it on my own. But I came back later on when Stan and I split up, and I was trying to diversify and get out of wrestling because I just didn't want to be an old wrestler. I was trying to learn something else to support my family. I mean, Mike and I are still around each other. And I mean, we did some business deals, and Mike's gone. So I don't need to try to say anything bad about anybody that's gone. But we weren't as close as I am with Stan or I am with today. I call Ted DiBiase. I've known Ted 50 years. He's turned 70 today. I mean, Brian Blair lives a mile from me. I mean, there's so many. Jerry Briscoe's right here. That's one of my mentors that he just sent me a thing, want me to go to Side Splitters and hear some jabroni comedian that probably won't make me laugh, but I'm going to go because he's 77 and I don't know how much longer he'll be around. So you create so many relationships and so many friendships. People identify and say, well, you must have been really close with him, or you must have been really close with him. Well, sometimes it's just what's perceived by what's presented to people on television or magazines or even just, walk of life. High school friends thought me and Mike would be best friends forever. Well, I mean, we were friends in high school all the way through high school. But the reason I really liked Mike when we were in high school because he was rich. I went to a really poor high school. I mean, my high school parking lot was like 55, 57 Chevrolets and all these old beat up old cars. And Mike would drive up in a brand new Camaro or a Corvette or whatever. And when I met Mike, I was in the 10th grade and we were in a biology class together. And we had this double desk that you sit two people at. And so Mike and I were in the back. And this is when I first met Mike. And he's talking about dad being a wrestler. And I'm talking about my dad being a prisoner of war. And so we kind of just hit it off. And then we started pulling ribs in the biology class. And then I got sent to the office 3 or 4 times. And he thought that would be funny. And he thought I was funny. And then one day he pulled out his wallet. And I had never, ever seen $100 bill. And he had 5 of them. And he goes, well, you want to go after school here and play some pool up there and then maybe go get something to eat? And I'm looking at him going, are those real $100 bills? And he's going, yeah, why? Ain't you ever seen one? And he let me hold it, and I'm freaking out, right? And I'm going, this is the friend I need going through school. And, I mean, say it like you want to, but it was that money kind of attracted me. And then being around his dad, who took a natural liking to me, not because of me, but because of what he respected my dad for his sacrifice for his country, he kind of took me under his wing. And then they kind of attached me to the family, and now I'm on a yacht. I mean, I'm in the fastest speedboats in Tampa Bay. I'm in the fastest cars. I mean, and money was no object. And I never paid for a thing from the 10th grade on. So then Mike and I grew close through that kind of a relationship.
So there's a video out there from Dutch Mantel. Dutch has a pretty popular podcast now at this point. He does pretty well for himself.
Right.
You guys
Good for him.
You guys are an iconic tag team, but in one of Dutch's videos, Dutch says that Stan or Steve, as an individual, really weren't getting over. Now, I want to revert back. We had Kevin Sullivan in the studio. I'm a WWE guy, right? Grew up in the Northeast. Steve Keirn, according to Sullivan, and I'm sure it's true, that you were this close to be put in the Bob Backlund position. So for someone at that level and being considered to become that champion, I would think you were pretty over. But this is Dutch's opinion on the video. And he says, you really couldn't draw a dime together alone, but when you got put together, it was gold. So Stan, would you agree with Dutch's comments?
Well, yes and no. I mean, before the Fabulous Ones started, I was the Georgia junior heavy single. I was also I had the U.S. Championship belt that I took over to Japan for 5 weeks. I wrestled against Fujinami in the Salt Palace main event. So I would, maybe if you're going to compare me or Steve to big singles guys like Hulk Hogan or Stone Cold or something, yeah, I would say I am lower. But I mean, speaking of mid card guys, to me Dutch was always a mid card guy, and I like Dutch. I'm not trying to knock him. Dutch did some booking. I never was interested in booking, but as far as on the card, I mean, pot calling the kettle black.
Steve, your thoughts on that comment?
Sure, I got an easy one. Here's my whole thing about wrestling. Wrestling is an opinion. Everybody has an opinion, and it's all different. No matter where you're from, what you've witnessed, what your experiences are, what your knowledge is, you formulate an opinion. Who do you think's good? Who do you think's bad? Who do you think can do things? Who do you think doesn't have a chance? And Dutch is formulating his opinion on his knowledge of Stan and I pretty much from being just in Tennessee. When we both went into Tennessee, Jerry Jarrett was totally lost on what to do with us. He knew he had money because that he stole me and Kevin Sullivan from Jim Barnett at the Omni in Atlanta. And we were working an angle on TBS, and they wanted to see how effective TBS was to go to territories that was a first nationwide show. And so Kevin went first, and then I followed into Tennessee. Well, one of the things I'd already heard about Tennessee was you don't want to go there. You'll never get over Lawler or Dundee. And so when he asked me at the Omni would I come, I said, nah, I heard all of these things about how political it is there. That, that's just not my style. NWA style was pretty strict wrestling at that time. Now, like Stan, I had held the world junior heavyweight title and dropped it to Fujinami and Sapporo. That was when I was supposed to go be the world champion up in WWF. Then I went through 5-time Florida heavyweight champion, Georgia champion. I was champion everywhere. Those belts are just symbols of what, people think are important, but it's a work. It's a work. I mean, no matter how many titles I've held and everything, the bottom line is Dutch Mantell didn't wrestle in the state of Florida. When I worked an angle with Bob Roop and we sold out every place in the state of Florida, and Dusty Rhodes was the only person that could do that. And Dusty put me over by saying, well, baby, the only boy that can put anybody in seats in this business down here in the state of Florida is Steve Keirn. And it really wasn't true because it takes Bob Roop, Steve Keirn, and the angle to do that. But I was credited with that. Dutch Mantell had no knowledge of that because that was territorial days. That wasn't like public knowledge. And when he made a statement like that about, Stan and I couldn't draw, he's absolutely right. When we went to the state of Tennessee, I went in there the same wrestler I was in Georgia, Carolinas, and Florida, and I didn't fit. I was like jamming a round peg in a square hole. I was still stiff. I would still light you up. Wayne Ferris, honky tonk man, asked me if he owed me money. He said, do I owe you money? You slapped me so hard in the chest I could feel it on my back. I go, brother, I'm into it. I believe it's real, and I got to make the audience believe it was real. Bill Dundee pulled me aside and said, you're never going to get over in this territory until you loosen up and become an entertainer. And so I'd never been in a territory where they had the loser of the match eat a can of dog food. I mean, to me, it was kind of like a lot of jokes. But, you have to understand the wrestling business. Just because it's your way doesn't mean it's their way. So you have to be a chameleon. You have to change colors. And exactly what I did. And I went from a serious wrestler to all of a sudden now I'm doing midget high spots. People loved it. But it was almost like the psychology was there is they want to laugh and have fun. And then when they turn up the heat, turn it up. And then that makes them mad at the heels, and then the baby faces come back. And the advantage Stan and I had, first of all, wasn't Stan and I. It was the right characters, the right time, and we had the right person that really supported us, which was our foundation, Jackie Fargo. He was over so strong in that territory that if Stan and I would have just been the fabulous ones with no Fargo history, we'd have probably had heat for the way we look. We're the only two guys in the territory that worked out. And we were cute. And when we were men, we weren't little boys. So we would have had heat. But because we were Jackie Fargo and a remake of the fabulous Fargos, who was over like Rover, we got over. And we didn't have heat. And guys like Dutch and other guys will always have their opinion. But what I see is a sad case, sometimes a jealousy of things, and it's just something that happens, and it's common. And sometimes people say, well, they can't do this, can't do that. He's right, but he's not really given the credit right, and he's got a bad reputation for his opinion on a lot of things anyway. So,
Well, Steve, besides wrestling, Dutch also cures cancer and builds rocket ships. I don't know if you know about that. He knows about everything
Well,
in the
he
world.
embellishes a lot of stuff.
Well, he should be president of the United States at this point. Stan.
Well, between him and Jimmy Cornette, boy, I've seen a real change in personalities over the last 30 years. I mean, Jimmy Cornette was nothing but a jabroni photographer, me and Stan. And all of a sudden, he's a genius to the wrestling world. And I'm going, what the hell happened? Was I asleep for the last 44 years of my career?
No,
Anyway.
you're just in an alternative universe right now. That's all.
Oh, yeah.
Stan, when they put you guys together, were you like, this is gold, I'm ready to print some money here?
Well, I didn't really know. Jerry Jarrett approached us and laid it out to us, and Steve and I both, as Dutch said, I think we were like mid-card guys there. So I was just ready to do whatever I could to help the territory, but also to put more money in my bank account. So I thought it was a great idea. And then, like Steve said, having a living legend like Jackie Fargo back us up and do the promos, these are my boys and all that kind of stuff, gave us his seal of approval. I had no idea it was going to be as big as it was. I mean, we were, I don't mean to brag, but we were selling out every night, and it was phenomenal. And we actually made more money selling gimmicks and pictures and Steve's merch brain, that was like 30 years before merch was even like really talked about. We were selling suspenders actually, and bow ties and baseball caps and keychains and I mean everything. And our weekly checks for our gimmick sales like surpassed our paycheck, and that's working on top, and selling out. So we were very, very fortunate, to have that spot. And I give all the praise, well, not only to my Lord and Savior, but I give a lot of praise to Jerry Jarrett, who, in my opinion, was a genius as far as wrestling. He had a brilliant mind for the business, and I miss that guy too. He was my favorite promoter.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say to both of you guys were the first ones to really do these vignettes or these music videos? Is that correct?
That's right.
So you
It
guys,
was right when MTV had just come out. That's where it all came from, and it was Jerry Jarrett's idea, and he used his production people. And I mean, Stan knows music, and he could tell you the tune, the label, the color, what recording people, whatever, by just hearing the song. But he was really, he's a music guy, and he's perfect. And then Jerry Jarrett would come up with ideas. Sometimes they're a little, kind of like borderline. I mean, when I ran FCW and had the developmental, I mean, that talent that's up there in WWE now that went through me, I can't tell you how many times they showed up a Fabulous Ones pictures of me and Stan looking like two gay guys from San Francisco standing on the top of a cake or something, and they go, "Hey, Coach, what's this all about?" I said, "Man, it's a long story, bro. It's a long story." I said, that picture right there made me and Stan enough to buy two Corvettes, a 65 and a 63 or whatever. Stan knew cars, too. When he said, "Hey, this is a good car, get this one," he said, we had auto traders every day in every city. That was what we read in the car. And we bought cars with our picture money and just had so much, extra money. And it got a little heat, too. But imitation is flattery, and look how many tag teams spun off of us. And there's a book. I got a book over here in my bookshelf right here. It talks about the tag team era and how Stan and I started that whole trend and everything, and with the music videos. And what it did was it sparked ideas for other teams. And I was never jealous. I mean, I always looked at it like, well, it's one thing to be the beginning, and it's the other thing to be an imitation. So I said, yeah, whatever. Whoever's successful, go for it.
So let me ask you about these video shoots, though, right? So when you look at them, the total 80s, right? But I mean, that's like, what are they telling you? Like, stare into the camera and lick your lips? I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm like, are you guys just laughing while you're doing this?
Well, we busted up a lot of times. I mean, there was one where we had one of the first ones was funny as hell to me because they had us with some horses in a barn, right? And Stan enlightens me out of nowhere that he's got a stigma about horses, that he hates horses. He don't want to even get around the horse. He don't like horses. He's a little bit afraid of them. And I've been stepped on him and everything too. And I'm not a big horse fan either. But I never thought about it the way Stan mentioned it to me, and I'm thinking, you got a point there about them damn horses and stuff. But there was so many times when, it was like, okay, we'll kind of turn around and stick your butts out and stuff like that. And I just look at Stan and go, as long as they're paying us, stick your butt out.
Hey, Stan, so you're part of this team, two very good-looking guys. I'm sure, I don't know if either one of you were married. Stan, I know you weren't from a previous conversation.
I was.
Yeah. So, but obviously there had to be a lot of women fans and all over you guys. Stan, was there ever jealousy between you and Steve, right? Because you're two good-looking guys. But now you're at a battle, right? Like, who's the better-looking of this super team?
No, we were much too engrossed in making money and showing up and having a good match. I mean, the women, were around, but they were like before the match, you'd walk out and they were, high fiving you and trying to hug you and stuff. But I mean, we were just, I mean, when you're riding the top of a wave, you need to ride that thing all the way, to the shore. So we're just, I mean, we were doing stuff, but at the same time, I think what really balanced it out was the fact that we were also just brawlers. I mean, we had some knockdown, drag out bloodbaths with teams like the Sheep Herders and the Moondog with those bones. And I mean, we would just destroy furniture, even though we were like the glamour guys, I mean, we did all that stuff that was really, really rugged stuff. So I think that kind of made the guys, instead of being jealous of us or disliking us because their wife or girlfriend liked us because they thought that we looked good. I mean, the guys respected us. So that they might look like little, cupcake guys, but these guys will fight. They'll get down and dirty. So I think that was a good balance tag team.
Steve, there's a story out there. I guess you guys are making good money, really good money, very popular tag team. That in the Memphis area, Coco Beware was taking your guys' entrance, and you took offense to that. Could you share your side of that story?
Sure. There's been several different spins off of this, and I even had to call Stan not that long ago, as a matter of fact, because I'd heard Ricky Morton do a podcast, and what he told in the podcast didn't sound anything like what I had remembered. And then I guess, so I said, well, maybe my memory's different than him. Maybe my experience was different than his. But here was the thing. I was taught in my industry by my mentors, who were Jack Briscoe, Harley Race, Terry Funk, Dory Funk Jr., and Hiro Matsuda, that if you had anything that you're protecting, example, your finish, and I use a sleeper hold in the state of Florida, so if anybody used a sleeper hold, they needed to not use a sleeper hold in the matches before me. Your character or anything like that, which weren't really that established back when I first started, but when we developed the Fabulous One, well, Coco came out and he did a character called Stagger Lee. And we just broke out with the Fabulous Ones, and now here we are with top hats and bow ties and the sequin tuxedo. And here comes Coco out and does the Stagger Lee, and he's doing the same thing. He has a white tuxedo coat on, a bow tie, and a top hat. Well, I was not only insulted, I felt like that it was like stepping right on what we're trying to do, and what that does is it dilutes what we're doing. Well, we had to travel from Memphis to Nashville, and we were in Nashville, and when I walked in the dressing room, there was a small dressing room in there, and there's a little stall shower in the corner and a toilet. And, I was pretty worked up by the time we got there, and I backed into that stall shower, and I started confronting Coco. And I started asking him questions. Now, the conversation, I can't verbatim tell you. That's 40 years ago. But I can tell you that I was heated, and I was letting him know I wasn't happy with him trying to do the same thing we're doing with our new characters, and it was infringement on what we were doing. Anyway, I sucker punched him. And I did, and I admit it, and that's just me. I mean, if I'm going to win a fight or if I'm going to be in a fight, I'm not. People aren't going to ask me who started the fight and all that. They're just going to ask you who wins or loses. Well, this is what, in my knowledge, that I remember about the fight was that I sucker punched him, and then we locked up and we fought, but we didn't go down. Neither one of us went down on the floor. We hooked up and we kind of got tied up, but everybody was trying to break it up almost right away. And anyway, now Coco's really screaming and yelling at me, and saying, I'm not afraid of you, and calling me names and all of that. And I just looked at him and I said, okay, well, let's just finish it. We squared off. We went at it again. But here was the end results. And this is the best I can remember. And this is what I always weigh it on. When it was over, neither one of us had a mark on us. Neither one of us had really gone down and gotten hurt. Neither one of us had kind of quit or said, that's enough, I've had enough. Nobody had pulled one of us off of the other one. I never looked at it like I did anything to damage Coco. I didn't beat up Coco, but I never felt like Coco beat me up either. So it was kind of like, the difference is the fight that Orndorff had with Vader there. I mean, Orndorff beat Vader relentlessly, and he looked like Elephant Man when it was over. To me, that was a fight. But that's the kind of growing up I had. I mean, Coco was not my first fight, but it wasn't one that I'm proud of or one that I won. I never kicked Coco's butt. Here's the deal. Coco's a born-again Christian like I am. And when he got the Hall of Fame award with WWE, I was an agent there. Coco out of nowhere walked up to me, and we had worked 100 times. Even when I was Skinner, I worked with Coco there. Never even mentioned that fight. And Coco walked up to me and said to me, he said, I'm sorry. He said, I'm sorry for what happened in Nashville. He said, you're right. And it took a long time for me to realize that. But when I got the bird gimmick and somebody tried to imitate it, I realized how you felt that night when I did the Stagger Lee thing. So he says, I apologize, and I hope you can forgive me. And I looked at him and said, man, I forgot all about it. I love you, Coco. There's no hard feelings between you and me. I mean, he's a real man. But the people that tell the story, and sometimes, Dutch Mantell is embellished. And he said we weren't even booked in Nashville. He said we were booked in Jonesboro, and we skipped the Jonesboro show to go to Nashville. First of all, you didn't do things like that, or you got fired. You don't skip a show you're the main event and go to another show to have a confrontation with somebody in the dressing room. But the other, I guess it's like opinions. It's like what they saw or what they felt happened. And, it's like I told Ricky Morton when I saw him after I heard his podcast, I called him out in Charlotte, North Carolina. I said, Ricky, I got to talk to you. And when I wanted to talk to him, he said his son followed me and him into a room like he knew that I was going to confront his dad about that. And his son kind of hovered over. And I looked at Ricky. I said, I don't know why you told the thing you told on that podcast, but I just don't agree with what you told. And he says, well, and he put his hands up on my shoulders and everything. Well, I love you. And he says, well, a tough guy, you're a tough guy. You want to sucker punch nobody. Tough guys, sucker punch guys. And he says, but this is the way I saw it. And, it's just what I remember. And I said, okay. That's all I can say, but I just wanted to let you know I was really let down by that story because I didn't feel like you told it right, and you made it sound like I got beat up really bad. And for somebody that got beat up really bad and didn't have a mark on them, that was kind of hard for me to swallow when I heard it. That's my story.
Good for you, Steve. I love it.
It's just what I remember. I mean, Stan was right there. I mean, if I got beat up, Stan's been in a lot of fights. As a matter of fact, I saw him beat up a guy really bad in Memphis one night, but the guy looked beat up. And I almost wanted to say, like when Ricky Morton said, I want to say, have you ever been in a fight? I mean, who's ever looked at a picture of the Rock and Roll Express and said, well, these look like a couple of tough guys?
Yeah. Stan, do you concur with Steve's side of the story?
Yeah, I mean, as he said, of course, if you go to court and you've got 12 witnesses, you're going to get 12 different stories. That's just the way it is. The YouTube video that I watched of Morton, it was funny. I mean, he embellished it and said that Coco was in the shower showering, and Steve attacked him in the shower. Now that makes for a really good visual, I guess, if you want to laugh. Like we got Coco stark naked, lathered up in a shower, and here comes Keirn charging the shower and starts fighting. Well, that didn't happen. I mean, it's just like Steve said, and Steve called it a sucker punch. To me, a sucker punch is when you throw a punch at somebody and they don't see it coming. Now this shower in Nashville is like a prefab building, and the shower is like a little RV shower. There's barely room for two grown men to even stand up in there. They were facing each other face to face. Steve threw the first punch. Now, but to me, that's not a sucker punch. If you're going to fight somebody, somebody's got to throw the first punch. Steve threw the first punch. At that time, Steve was known as the toughest guy there in that territory. Coco was afraid of Steve. And when the fight started and they spilled out of that little shower, because you can't throw anything in there, and they spilled out into the dressing room, Coco was saying, I don't want to fight you, Steve Keirn. I don't want to fight you, because he was scared. But then after they had locked horns a couple of times, and Coco realized that he was holding his own because he's a tough guy. Then he went to, I'll fight you all night, Steve Keirn. So that confidence built up in him. And but like Steve said, there was no blood, there were no marks, and I'm happy for that, because I like both of them. Of course, I don't want to see anybody get hurt. And if the truth be known, now that this is pure speculation on my part, I think Coco was told to do that. Now I could be wrong, but I think maybe somebody who was perhaps booking at that time maybe pulled him aside, said, hey, the Fabs are getting over doing that stuff. You ought to do it too, man. Try it out. And you go, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Do whatever the booker says. Now that's just, like I said, that's a theory. But as it turned out, Coco's been, from what I see on YouTube, he's been in several fights and never lost any of them. So he's got to be a very tough guy. And Steve, of course, is a very tough guy. So it was just a bad deal, and I'm sorry it happened, but I'm just glad that nobody got hurt.
Well, also the best part of it is that Coco used Steve's full name when he was challenging him. Didn't call him Keirn or Steve. He called him Steve Keirn, which is good.
Yes.
Stan, did you know in 2011 you died?
I did. That was a crazy story. My phone started lighting up. Guys were saying, Stan, I just wanted to see if you're still here. And I said, what is going on? So I called my friend Sal Carenti, who keeps his finger on the pulse of the wrestling business, because I don't follow it. I don't watch wrestling. I hadn't watched it in decades. And so this truck driver in Memphis got married and told his wife that he was Stan Lane of the Fabulous Ones. And she believed him. And it's kind of crazy, because at that time when they got married, Steve and I were on top in the Memphis territory. All she had to do was look on TV, and she could have figured it out. But apparently she didn't do that, or she didn't want to do that. But anyway, the guy passed away, and so they sent the obituary to the Memphis Observer, or whatever the newspaper is called there, and they don't like fact check these obituaries. Whatever you send them, they're going to print it. So she said he was one half the greatest tag team of all time, the Fabulous One. He was, loved animals and all that kind of stuff. And I actually heard at a funeral they had a gimmick table, and they were selling pictures of me and Steve. So the guy apparently favored me, looks wise. I never saw the picture, but Sal called her up, and she was like adamant. I was married to Stan Lane, and you're wrong. But finally, I think the evidence was so overwhelming that she admitted it, that she said, okay, maybe I wasn't married to him, but I mean, the family had to have known. It was bizarre.
Think about that poor lady, like how she looked at her life after that. She thought she was married to Stan Lane for all those years. All right, I'm
Some
gonna.
unbelievable things have happened in this business. I
You
mean,
wait.
you know, you can't surprise me or come up with something that I can't say that, oh, wow, you know, I would have never thought that had happened. I mean, you know, when I ran the FCW thing and the talent that got developed there, there was a lot of times when I'm thinking, you know, wow, this is going to be tough for you. And now I'm looking at them and they're making millions of dollars. And I'm going like, things really can surprise you. But you know, things like what happened to Stan. I mean, I just heard that same story about Stan dying again, and I'd heard it a few times, but I heard it just the other day, and a guy was talking about saying that you know they were really saying Stan was dead, and it didn't come to me that Stan had died, so I never really heard that story. But at the same time, I mean, you know, you hear about movie stars that are always told that, you know, somebody says, oh, they died or whatever. I mean, I heard that Tom Hanks died a long time ago or something, you know, and then I saw him on TV. I said, man, I thought that guy was dead. I mean, you know, so it's not unusual. I mean, people have a tendency to wander in their own mind sometimes, I guess.
So I'll ask both of you this question: where do the fabulous ones rank in the greatest tag teams of all time?
Well, if you ask us,
Oh, got a little frozen Steve. All right, Stan, you're on.
They froze up.
Oh, he's back.
nah, I got an answer because I'm a realist, but at the same time, I mean, you know, I don't underplay us, but you know, Stan has his side too. So let Stan tell you.
well, well, Steve, you kind of froze up. What was your answer? You froze there for a
Well,
second.
my answer is there's just too many to put a label on the greatest tag team. I mean, you know, they're just endless. I sent Stan an art rendering just that I saw on Facebook just today, and it was the Road Warriors opponents, and it's got the Road Warriors in an art rendering, and they're facing all of these tag teams, and they're some of the greatest tag teams of all times, and they're looking back at them. But a lot of those tag team people are really close friends of mine, and I was sending it everywhere to the guys that are still alive, going, "Hey, you might not have seen this, but you know they honored you, you know, and just being the Road Warriors opponents or whatever." But it was a montage, and then when you see all of that, I mean, you know, I look at it. We were a great tag team, and I love being partners with Stan, and we were very successful. Were we the greatest? Well, who would ever know? Because it was just limited to a couple of territories. We never really went on the mainstream WWF back in the day. We never hit the big WCW together. We would have been prior to the little miniature guys like the Rock and Roll Express and the Fanics or the Fantastics or whatever they were. We were prior to the Midnight Rockers, but we were more mature. We were more manly looking, but we were still in our 30s, which made us really young. Eddie Graham told me when I started, wrestling fans would not accept me as a serious butt whipper until I was 30 plus and I had a few dings on me. Like I had taken some beatings to achieve my experience in that ring. And now I'm a veteran. And that always made sense to me. So it depends on the era you're talking about, and it depends on the comparisons. But when I think of Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Bret Hart, and when I think about, I mean, DiBiase and Mike Rotundo, and there's just so many tag teams out there, Demolition, the Road Warriors. I mean, the list is endless. So I say there was a lot of great tag teams. I don't say we were the greatest, but I said we held our own and we had respect from all of them because guess what? We ended up working with 90% of them. And if we didn't have respect, they wouldn't have sold us. they wouldn't have worked with us, and they wouldn't have been gentle on us. I remember working with Dr. Death and Steve Williams and Jim Knight. What's his name? Hacksaw Jim Duggan. We went to Oklahoma to work for Bill Watts, and here we are, the fabulous ones, and we come in there to work against the two toughest guys in the territory. And it was like, uh-oh. This is going to be a night when somebody's just going to jerk us around. And they worked with us and gave us the utmost respect. And we bounced all over and put them over and everything like that. But back in our era and the territory things, everybody was really, to me, a great worker. You never had to worry about that. If somebody was a lame worker, it was one or two in the whole territory.
Well, Steve, set me straight on something. You mentioned the Road Warriors. Again, we all know the
Sure.
stories when supposedly they were supposed to drop the AWA titles to you and Stan. Being an old school guy, if that story is true, why did you accept the fact that they wouldn't follow the promoter's rules?
Because that's not the way I was raised. I wasn't raised to go to the ring and go against the guy that's paying me and not do what I'm told. I'm a soldier. I'm a soldier that works for an Army general. The Army general pays me. And whatever the Army general asks me to do, I'm going to do it. And if he asks me to get beat, then I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability to make my opponent look better. That's the whole nature of the wrestling business. It's what happens is guys' egos get in the way and they really start believing that there's something that they're really not. The business is a work. The Road Warriors were very difficult to deal with, but it was mostly Hawk, and he was kind of hot-headed, but he was just very green, and he's working with guys that are veterans that are willing to do anything in the ring, but we're not willing to change the finish on a territory from the boss, from what we were told to do when we came into the ring. I'm not willing to relinquish and go along with them. They're not paying me. And I know that when I come back from that dressing room, I'm going to have to answer for that. So you guys are supposed to go over what happened. You lost. Well, they told us to. What do you mean they told you to? You mean to tell me now the other team tells you, hey, man, we don't want to lose tonight, so you're losing. What? Well, that's kind of how it happened. Me and Stan are bouncing around. We're on cloud nine. We ain't seen this many people in our whole career in this Minneapolis Coliseum. And everybody's freaking out. We don't even know what we are now. We got chaps on. We got bow ties. We got Japanese stuff on. We got every kind of gimmick that we own. We went out there. We weren't even sure what we were at that time, just trying to be like entertainers. And now we got two guys that are telling us, oh, just do it our way and nobody gets hurt. Well, I'm in another world when I start. I'm bouncing around, feeling the ropes. I'm looking for holes in the mat. I'm looking for things that are going to hurt me. And I hear that, and my first response is, what? I don't know if I heard that right? Am I deaf? Did I just hear we're not doing it? And if we do it your way, we won't get hurt. And then I made the mistake of getting up there and go, what'd you say? And then boom, next thing I know, I'm getting beat up for about the next 10 minutes. And it just, it snowballed, but we outsmarted them. We sure did. Whenever I tell Stan, hey, pack your bag. We're not going back to the dressing room. We're leaving straight from the building. Stan would just look at me and go, uh-oh. What are we going to do now? I don't know, but we'll figure it out as we go. It's a battle. You know what wrestling is? Wrestling is reality. It's a play school game of king on the mountain for money and the real deal, your income. And you're playing king on the mountain your whole career. You're always trying to climb the mountain to get farther up the card. And halfway up, people are pulling you by the legs, trying to pull you down, whether it's talking about you in cars, whether it's creating rumors about you, whether it's putting you down, oh, he had horrible matches, oh, I can't work with the guy, whatever it is. But you're fighting that battle the whole time. Once you get on top of that mountain, Now you're just trying to kick everybody off that's coming up after you. And everybody's targeting you, no matter if it's a political target that they're putting on you, no matter if it's a personal thing, saying you're gay or whatever you are, or something to just try to trash you in a dressing room, and just anything to do to put you down, they're going to do it. So you're playing king on the mountain the whole time. Road Warriors, they were just another obstacle, but I loved them. I got along great with them, except for when we had turned on them. And 2 nights, Hawk wanted to kill me. But other than that, we hugged all the time.
Stan, what was your feelings about that match?
I was thinking a short while ago, and I could be wrong, but I worked with the Road Warriors perhaps more than anybody else, because I worked with the Road Warriors with Steve, the Fabulous Ones, a lot, and then I worked with them again with Bobby, the Midnight Express. I worked with them with 2 tag teams quite a bit, so I may have had more frequent flyer mileage than anybody, taking those press slams. But as far as the ratings of the Fabs, I mean that's like Steve said, that'd be too tough. I'd put us in the top 30, but I would never say we were in the top 5 or 10 or whatever. I mean, the Midnight Express were a great tag team too. I feel Bobby was one of the greatest workers of all time. But
Absolutely.
The Road Warriors, they never really grasped the fact that to get heat, you can't go out there and tell the fans, the people in your interviews, that you're going to kick somebody's butt, and then you go out there and you kick their butt. Well, that's not being a heel. That's being a baby face. You told them what you're going to do, and you did it. They could have gotten tremendous heat looking the way they did, and if you really got tough with them and fought back, and then they finally maybe a little bit of a cowardice showed up in them. Of course, they would have never done that because they were too. I mean, their minds were, we're tough and it's legit, so we couldn't do that. But can you imagine the heat that they would have gotten if they would have just shown a little bit of cowardice? The people would go, look at those guys are big and huge, and look at them. They're really, when it gets down to them, they go and gets tough. They got a little bit of wimp in them, but that never happened. They finally, I think, kind of smartened up towards the end. And they were both great guys. We got along good with them, but we had a few little run-ins. But all in all, they were nice guys. They just believed their gimmick. They were both bouncers, I think, at a nightclub, and they fought a lot. And they just said, well, in real life, the Fabulous Ones couldn't beat us up in real life. Well, you know what? Wrestling is not real life. Wrestling is make-believe. It's fantasy. That's what you got to give the people, the fantasy. They come there after working 5 days a week, and they want to immerse themselves in that fantasy world, and you gotta play your part. And Hawk and Animal had a hard time not playing the part of, we're legitimately tough, and we're always going to be tough, and we're going to win every match we get into, and nobody's going to beat us.
It's a great point. So we're towards the end. I want to thank you for this honor. Real quick, I was talking to Stan before the show, and Steve, you're doing the circuit. Legends like yourself, are now getting the flowers and the opportunity to make some, meet the fans that adore them and thank them like both of you, and you're getting some decent paydays for it, which is well deserved. So I'm bringing on a promoter who's bringing you guys in.
Kayfabe.
There's your man Eric Sims there, Steve.
How are you guys?
Hey, Eric,
A face
what's up,
a face only Jesus would love.
Stop.
So Eric wants to promote your guys' next signing before we get off the air.
So we're
All right,
doing
Eric.
Hey, how are you? How are you, Steve? And Stan,
I'm
pleasure to
awesome,
meet
Eric.
you.
Good to see you.
So, pleasure. So we're doing an old school autograph signing down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina on February 3rd, and we're going to reunite the Fabulous Ones for the first time in a long time. We're going to do it at the Cook's Flea Market, Battle Axe Toys booth M50, and we're gonna reunite not only Steve Keirn and Stan Lane, but we're going to bring in Dr. Tom Pritchard. Also do
All right.
Fabulous One in Heavenly Bodies. reunion over there, and hopefully a lot of fans show up, and we're gonna have a good old time for a couple hours on Saturday, February 3rd.
Looking forward to it, Eric.
It's going to be great seeing Tom again. I don't see Tom all that much. I've seen Steve a lot more, but the Heavenly Bodies were trendsetters in Smoky Mountain Wrestling for a while. And when I finally retired, when I'd had enough of driving up and down those mountains and Smoky Mountain, and had gotten tired of those people in Harlan, Kentucky and Hazard, Kentucky threatening to stab me with a knife, I backed away and I gave my
the good old days.
So let me help you out here a little bit, Eric. So for the fans that can't actually get to the event, is there a possibility they may be able to get a signed autograph of this iconic tag team?
Absolutely. I have tons and tons of Fabulous One photos. I have Heavenly Body photos. I have singular shots of them all. I even have a hat. I even have the bow tie that they're going to sign.
What the hell?
I got the gloves. I am fully prepared for this signing. So I spared no expense. I've got.
Let me see that. Let me see that hat.
Listen, it's the best that I can afford that Amazon can give me in bulk.
That's a black Irish hat. It looks like it looks like something you'd have got in New Jersey.
It's a gangster hat, but
that looks like a Laurel and Hardy hat there, Steve.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
That's what it looked like on Amazon. God damn it! It's for the price that I want to pay, it's easy to sign up there. They can sign the boat. They can sign the bow ties, and they can sign and inscribe the gloves.
Absolutely, I'll sign everything.
You see what you're missing out on, Stan? You see what you're missing out on?
Last time I was with Eric.
Not to mention, also, Steve also did Skinner in WWE. So we have the Bowie knife. We have more of them to sign too.
That's what I was going to say. Last time I worked for him, I was signing Bowie knives. Now I'm signing Laurel and Hardy hats.
There you go.
It don't matter.
Listen, how does this look? How does this look on me? Let's see if I can put this. Well, is it good enough here? Should I put the gloves on?
Put that hat on. No, put
you know
what?
Wait a minute. You know what I just found out? If you guys have a
What?
6-man tag team, you could call yourself the Flabberous Ones, right? If you had Eric to your team.
Yeah. There you go. Because if you remember, if you look at the photos,
Right.
you can see them suspenders, gloves, and I got other pictures where they're wearing hats. So,
All right. Well, Eric, we got to let these two gentlemen go. They've been more than wonderful.
One thing that I want to say about that and appearing with Eric, and I appreciate Eric putting us together, because I still travel and I'm doing a lot of these things. And the one thing that's really missing in the ingredient for me traveling is having Stan there, and Stan doesn't travel anymore, and I respect that. And Eric made arrangements to take us closer to Stan so we could do this. But this was a compliment to me personally, because this might be one of the only opportunities I get to be with Stan, because unless a promoter puts us together, for us to be make an appearance together, it's got to be up there close to Stan. And so this might be one of our last opportunities to actually appear together as the tag team, the Fabulous Ones. And if you look at our original Remco dolls now, I mean, when those first came out, those action figures, I was so impressed, and I was so honored, and I was humbled. But I went and bought them all at Toys R Us, and I've even had Sam Stein several of the ones that I kept that weren't unwrapped or whatever. But I went on eBay and looked at the price. I bought them for like $4.95 a piece in Minneapolis when they first came out, and I've seen them as high as $1,500. So a real true collector and a historian for pro wrestling that would have an opportunity to have Stan and I sign something together First of all, it's a blessing from God Almighty that we're both still alive and healthy and can do this kind of a thing. But it's also a blessing from Eric to have us together. And I totally appreciate it, Eric. I appreciate where you're coming from. I'll sign anything but girls' underwear. That's the only thing I'm drawing a line on.
I worked with Steve back in December for the first time, and I got to say, when you're working with different talent, it's a feeling out process the first time because, just you don't know how they're going to be and this and that. And the minute he got in the car with me and he just started talking and telling stories, and I said to myself, this is going to be one of the best trips ever. And, I got to say, it was one of the best tours I've had because, my God, just being on the learning tree of Steve was just unbelievable. And then on top of that, we had Tony Atlas in the car. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but Tony drove you crazy that whole fucking trip.
Tell him what he said to me. Finally, he kept saying stuff. Tony's a liberal Democrat, and I'm a diehard Republican. But I don't talk politics. But he's rambling on in the front seat, and I'm doing everything I can to bite my lip and just get along. And I finally tried to butt in one time to get something, and he turns and says, Steve, two people don't sing at the same time, and two people sure can't talk at the same time. And I shut my mouth the rest of the time, and I just thought, wait a minute.
And I told Tony, hey, let Steve talk. Give him let him talk. He has an opinion too. I mean, goddamn. I mean, he's just rattling on. He just keeps going. He loves you, but he just rattling on and on and on and on.
All right, with that,
train him or help get him in and something.
With that, Stan and Steve, thank you for taking the time out to have this interview. What an honor it is to have both of you on the show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you both what you've done for the industry, and I wish you guys only the best. God bless.
Well, thank you, and God bless you, and God bless you, Stan.
See you soon.
Hey, why don't you guys tag each other out? Can you tag it? Nope, other hand. There you go. There you go. Thank you, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, the great, fabulous ones. Love the interview. Again, I thank you all for joining us this Thursday. I love you all. I want to again thank the fabulous ones. I want to thank Eric Sims, obviously Abe. I want to thank you for another great show. And again, we'll see you next Thursday. Have a good one.